Jason. Today we're going to unbox a call that's being returned to me for the purposes of tuning it. I don't know what's in the box. I always look forward to discovering what's in there, what kind of call it is, what era a call it is. So let's discover it together, and I'll walk through the process of oiling and tuning and bringing it back to life. Hope you enjoy. Well, here we are. Package delivered from the United States Postal Service. Took a while to get here over Christmas, but let's open it up and see what we got over inside. Got a little note, probably telling me what to do in payment. And then I always appreciate someone who wraps their calls really nice, so it's not going to get hurt in this bubble wrap. So let's just take that apart. Doing a really good job here. Ooh, nice old call. Look at that. Oh, it's a gorgeous call. Smelling it, yeah. Anyway, beautiful old call. It's awesome. I love just looking at these old calls, a little rough inside. So he's got an old reed in there, 984L. So this is an old style old style standard call. He's got a more recent reed or cork in there. So he's had it tuned. The cork actually feels pretty tight. So one of the things that I do whenever I look at a call is I want to blow on it before I take it apart. That's a problem. It's locking up. So it's locking up. So a couple of reasons for that potentially. Call's in good shape. I can tell by this call, it actually looks like a barrel I might have made. My dad had a pretty particular way of doing it, and I was less precise. But anyway, this call is probably made somewhere in the 70s, 80s. So take this apart, it's locking up. So I can look at that reed and see that the curve is gone. So if you look at what the curve should be on a more current version of that reed, keep in mind that the length is, the curve is off. So that is the curve hot off the press for the calls, current calls. You can also see that we cut them differently. Back in the day, my dad was cutting them in that long style, and that's my dad's handwriting there. But cutting them differently now. So definitely needs a new reed, so I'm gonna pull that reed out. And the reed's nice and stiff, so sometimes you gotta give it a little assistance, push it out, because you don't wanna, it's stuck in there. So I might need to, the cork is stuck in there. Been in there for a while. That's, wow. Really stuck in there. So this cork has been in there. Oh, there we go. That reed and cork has been in there a while. Ooh, and that's kind of jammed in too. To get that out of there without breaking anything. Breaking the forks. Jeez. Yeah, so this is another reason taking your calls apart every once in a while is a good idea, because that cork has kind of adhered itself. You can see that this reed has really been through it. The guy's probably shot a lot of ducks over this. Always makes me wonder what the stories are behind these calls, but super dirty. Reed like this should be replaced. Of course it was stuck in there, and the bend is gone somehow. A couple of reasons for that. He might have jammed it, putting the call back together. You know how that goes. You got it and you go like that. Or he left it in a hot truck and kind of lost the bend on the reed, which happens every once in a while. So I've got to get that thing out of there. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this little file, a little more blunt, see if I can get that out of there. I just want to be careful, because if you break those forks, you're dealing with a whole nother problem. What I may need to do is do this little, oops, knocked over some coals over there. Take this little razor blade and run it under there. Kind of unseat it. So there we go. See if that helps get that out of there. Might need to do the same on top. Very carefully. And man, that is just in there. Been a while since I had a cork stick like that before. Man, oh man. There we go. That's getting it out of there. Man. So now I gotta trim. Kinda gotta get that cord out of there. You gotta get rid of all the cork. We're gonna put a new one in there, seated. I don't know what would have made it get so stuck in there. Potentially putting it together with oil in it? I don't know. Okay, that's cleaned out of there. So, good news is, other than the fact that those cork is kind of a mess, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna oil it up real quick. What I like to do, the platform itself looks in good shape. And so I'm gonna oil this up and go from there. So you've seen me do this before. I'm gonna oil up the caul, clean it up. Just for your information, we use linseed oil. You can get this at an art store, hardware store, and then 90% of that, and then 10% of odorless turpentine is the best. And use the turp so it'll dry a little quicker. So got a mixture of that here. Sometimes those things get a little tight, and spur that around. And I'm gonna be very liberal with this at first. So I just sop it up. I get everything really covered. And all I'm doing is just going to, in there. You can see it's really dry down in there too, so it's good to get as much as you can down in there. Pipe cleaner's the best because it'll just, you double it up, it'll fit all the way through to the channel. And you can kind of get everything. And then I'll just let that sit there. I'll do the barrel. Like I said, I'm very liberal with it, get it everywhere. And a bunch there too, super dry, super dry. Get on the side. Let that sit there. And then, see if any of these rags are still good. Yep. To get the center, I use like a dowel. Get the barrel. Again, be pretty generous with the linseed oil because I can see this is super dry. Again, I recommend doing this twice a year, minimum, beginning of the season, end of the season. The more you take care of your calls like this, the less will last. But and you can look down there and see if you got it up all the spots, but like I said, I'm going to dry these off. I usually let them sit for about a half hour. And then I just rub it in. And I run my fingernails into the lines, the decorative lines. You can kind of clear out any muck in there. Do the same here. Make sure everything's covered. We'll come back, clean that up in a minute. The channel The other thing you can do is, part of the process is just making sure your error hole is super unobstructed too. And this is just dry, it's in good shape. Guy took good care of his call. It's got some dings on it, means he's been using it, but it's in good shape. So, there we are. What I normally do is I put everything away, let that sit for 30 minutes or an hour, let it soak in. If it's super hot where you are, you just want to be careful that you don't let it sit too long to kind of let it all get mucked up. But I'll come back, put that in there, and then we'll tune that baby. Oops, gotta put this one in there too. All right, so sometimes I do this with a dry cloth. In this case, I'm going to use a paper towel. Definitely something that you won't get. So I'm just going to dry it off now. Just any excess oil that's on it. You don't want excess oil sitting on the call. I'm not afraid of leaving some excess oil inside where it's dry because that'll soak in. But where the reed is, you want to get that real clean. We'll come back to that, and on the outside. So. And I'll dry this off. Again, run my lines through again to do a quick clean of that. Make sure I get that. And then we're good. So you can see, kind of brighten up the look of that call. Clean it up nicely. So the next step, after I wash my hands, we're going to tune this baby. So one of the things I don't have the advantage of is knowing how this call sounded, at least minimally. Before tuning it. So a lot of times guys will send calls in, need a tune, and I like to hear a little bit of what the call sounded like, even if it's rough, even if the reed's in bad shape or whatever, just to kind of know what sound I need to try to duplicate if they like it. And a lot of times guys will say, hey, I want it deeper or raspier or whatever. The old style calls, one of the things my dad did with the newer style calls, he made the tuning super easy. You pop those reeds in, they're all the same length. The channel length is all the same, so it's really just replace reed and cork and you're done. The old style calls, there was some variance in the length of the channels, especially with older Iversons. Dad kind of dialed that in, but nevertheless, because we have to deal with EV Iverson era calls and some of my dad's and some of mine and vice versa, he standardized a reed that was long enough to handle some of the longer channel calls that EV did. And so you got to trim these. So here's the trick. You can see the reed he had in there is significantly shorter, which tells me that he had a fairly easy blowing call. This old 984L, this design evolved into this one, and my dad did this. So what I'm going to try to do is, we typically cut them so that the tip is pretty close to where you want it. Because he's got a wide tip on that reed, I may trim some off the front, but I'm going to do the vast majority of trimming on the back. Because as you can see, given where that channel length thing, we're going to need to do some trimming. But just for sake of illustration, what we're going to do is we're going to put that reed in there so the other thing that, before we do that you need to do or will want to do, I would recommend using some sort of hard straight edge like this ruler to kind of clean off your surface. A lot of junk gets on there. As you can see, there was probably cork underneath the back portion of this that we want to get off. If you're super gentle, you can take a very fine file, and you're not taking wood off. You're just taking whatever junk was there off. So you're actually kind of just taking whatever's off. Now, and be careful about filing under the forks, because that'll change the dynamic of the ability to get a tight fit with the reed and cork. So if you take too much off, it'll make that difficult. So we're going to put this in there, and you can already tell that it's going to be too long. See, it's way too long. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim this just a little bit, and just going to take a little bit off the back, and we'll start there and go from there. Now, I'm going to slide that cork in there. green out. Oops, gotta get that cork all the way back. There we go. Let's see how it sounds. Now, that's not too bad. Now the decision point is I mean, honestly, that's pretty good with that first cut. I don't even know if I want to mess with it much further than that. The hard part is man, I might have got lucky on that one. A lot of times you have to mess with those quite a bit. All I did is trim a little off the back end of the reed. And I'm going to leave that. I love the sound of that. These old style calls are super raspy. They don't ring like modern calls. But they've got, this is just good low end raspy. Easy to get a chuckle. And I think that sounds fantastic. For the purposes of this video, literally one cut. I'm a little shocked. I thought it was going to take me a while. So that's it. Now, it's interesting. You might wonder, it's pretty close. So here's the thing. This is a little shorter, but it's got a wider front. So what's going to end up happening with that tighter tip, going to make it a little easier to move that reed on the front end. So I think you're going to end up at the same place that my dad used to do with that cut. And I don't know when my dad started changing the cut on these, but this is the most recent cut he used to do that I continue to do in support of what some of these older calls. So that's it. Old style duck call. It's beautiful. I'm going to send this back to this guy and hopefully he'll love it. Thanks for tuning in.